Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Fantasy Birds. Today, we are back with three must-draft running backs in 2022 fantasy football. Let's hop right into our three top running backs that we need to be drafting. First guy on this list is going to be Kareem Hunt for the Cleveland Browns. Let's talk about Kareem Hunt and what he did the previous year. Really struggled with injuries toward the end of the year, but the first 6 games of the season is where we want to focus with Kareem Hunt. In these first 6 games, 5 touchdowns in these games, really being used in the red zone as Nick Chubb is between the 20s, getting them down the field with this monstrous run game and offensive line. Last season, in these 6 games, 5 touchdowns. With those touchdowns, because we will see some regression in that area, still getting over 10 carries in 5 of these 6 games. So the volume's there for Kareem Hunt, and the touchdown upside is clearly there with this Cleveland Browns offense that is looking to move the ball consistently. Yeah, there are question marks at quarterback with Deshaun Watson, but even if Deshaun Watson's suspended for a number of games, we've seen him be able to be efficient with quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield. And even if Jacoby Brissett is the starting quarterback, this run game is going to be heavily utilized. And Kareem Hunt makes a lot of his money in the receiving game for this team. Nick Chubb, pretty much a non-factor in the receiving game. Kareem Hunt, nearly 4 catches per game in those first 6 games of the season that we talked about. In these first 6 games, averaging nearly 15.5 fantasy points per game in half PPR settings. So even if we take out the touchdown volume that he saw from previous season, there's room for him to be able to be a flex option in this Cleveland Browns offense, even with some touchdown regression. So Kareem Hunt, definitely a guy we need to be keeping our eye on. And let's not even look at the fact that there's elite handcuff upside with Kareem Hunt. If Nick Chubb is to go down with some serious injury, Kareem Hunt's easily going to be a top 10 running back for the remainder of the season as the lone running back for this Cleveland Browns team. Definitely a timeshare in Cleveland. We all know that. That's no secret. That's why Nick Chubb upside is hindered a bit, but Kareem Hunt, definitely a premier handcuff with flex upside that we've seen. 15.5 fantasy points per game. Definitely nothing to sneeze at in half PPR setting, especially when you're getting the receiving work. So he's pretty much game script proof. And there's potential for a Deshaun Watson outburst for this Cleveland Browns offense if he is able to play. Kareem Hunt definitely going to profit from an elite offensive passing game for this Browns team. So Kareem Hunt's going to be our number 1 running back to must draft in 2022 fantasy football. Second guy on our list is going to be David Montgomery for the Chicago Bears. David Montgomery is a very polarizing player in fantasy. Some people love him, some people hate him, but you can't argue the volume he is getting in Chicago. Definitely missed a portion of the season last year with injury, but was able to bounce back. People are having concerns about Khalil Herbert taking over a portion of his volume in Chicago. But what we saw from a year ago, Herbert definitely stepped into that role while Montgomery was sidelined with injury. But once Montgomery stepped back into the starting lineup, Herbert didn't even see 5 touches a single game the rest of the way. So Montgomery's got this position on lock. Last season, double-digit carries in every single game he played in. Nearly 17 carries per game he averaged in those games that he played in. 13 games he suited up for last season. Huge receiving back here, which is definitely important in fantasy, especially on a struggling offense where the game script might get away from the Bears and they're constantly needing to be throwing the ball. So he's not going to be game scripted out of the Chicago Bears offense, which is extremely important. Getting around 3 to 4 catches per game. Previous coach Matt Nagy out in Chicago. A lot of people think he was holding this team, this offensive back in particular. Get a new coach in there, new offensive scheme. Maybe David Montgomery can have that breakout type season. But even if he stays around the same numbers, he's still a huge value in drafts. Going around the running back 19 average draft position. And from a season ago, he was the running back 19 and he missed games on the year. So if I can get a guy who is being drafted at his floor, considering the volume he is going to see this year, I'm loving David Montgomery in fantasy, even though he doesn't have that top upside to be a top 3 overall back in fantasy. He definitely has top 12 ability, especially when you're giving him at 19 when he did that last season while missing those 4 games. So David Montgomery going to be our number 2 must draft running back in fantasy football 2022. The last guy on our list is going to be Miles Sanders, the running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. We're kind of seeing a continuing trend here with these guys in 2021, missing a portion of the season with injury, still having a decent season. Last season, splitting worth with Jordan Howard and Boston Scott in this Philadelphia backfield. So definitely huge committee from a season ago. Jordan Howard actually getting over 20 plus red zone carries, which hindered Miles Sanders' ability to score touchdowns. Actually 0 touchdowns from a season ago. One of only 2 running backs to ever have over 160 touches and not be able to score a touchdown in the entire season. So we definitely expect some touchdown regression in the positive manner for Miles Sanders. But Boston Scott is still going to play a huge factor in this backfield. Going to be a 60-40 split, but I'll take a starting running back in the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles when he's going as running back 28 off the board. Definitely some clear smash potential here if he's able, this Philadelphia offense is able to consistently move the ball how they expect to, with the additions of AJ, a top tier offensive line, and Jalen Hurts coming into his own in the NFL. So if you're a believer in Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Miles Sanders definitely needs to be a guy on your radar, especially at running back 28, going outside the top 24 running backs for a starting running back in the NFL. I don't see a reason why Miles Sanders can't provide at least top 20 value when you're getting him late 7th round of drafts. Definitely a huge part in the receiving game, which is going to, as we talked about with Montgomery and Kareem Hunt, definitely going to increase their flow from game to game. Game script proof, as we like to say, which we love. Around 3 to 4 receptions per game. Sanders is going to see a huge part in this offense, especially like we talked about, Jordan Howard leaving the red zone, and Miles Sanders is going to become that red zone feature back. So even with Boston Scott, we're not worried about it. Miles Sanders going to see some touchdown regression back to the mean in a positive fashion. So Miles Sanders as running back 28, I mean, you can't really beat a starting running back potential, getting him near running back 30. So Miles Sanders is going to be our 3rd and final must draft running back in 2022 fantasy football. We thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week with another episode of the Fantasy Birds.